Hey guys, this is Mirza. I run the business team here at Injective Labs, one of the core contributors to Injective, the protocol. And today I'll be talking to you about the Injective Toolkit, both as it pertains to the technical end of things and the business end of things. So let's get started. Before we sort of jump into things, I want to explain to all of you what Injective sort of is on a high level. And we'll get into all the nifty features and functionalities on Injective itself. So as an overview, Injective is the blockchain built for finance. What that effectively means is every single integration we do, every single parameter that we upgrade, every single collaboration is all engineered to empower Web3 finance developers and to create the best infrastructure for Web3 finance developers. So what does that mean? It means we've created a number of different functionalities that I'll start getting into right now to empower these Web3 finance devs. It begins with Injective's core functionalities, such as its zero gas fees. So on Injective today, what we did over the past few years is optimize the stack so that you don't necessarily have to pay any gas fees. We've compressed gas fees to such an extent that the user actually doesn't see any gas fees when transacting on the chain. How that works in practice is when a transaction goes through on blockchains, there's of course a small transaction fee, right? But on Injective, the validators are effectively paying back the end users, so the end user ends up paying no fees. So this actually gets rid of one of the biggest bottlenecks in crypto today, in my opinion, which is, of course, gas fees that tend to be high on many other chains. But we realized that if we want DeFi to truly thrive, if you want to have sort of TradFi functionalities in DeFi, you can't have high barriers to entry with high gas fees. The second important part about Injective is its instant transaction finality. So we utilize Tendermint consensus. So that means when you send a transaction through, it's actually just finalized. We've also made a number of different optimizations to reduce block times down to sub-seconds. So right now, Injective on mainnet is doing about processing a block in about 0.8 seconds, which just means you have much more performant DeFi that can live and thrive on Injective because of how fast it is and how cheap it is today. And the last part of Injective that I think is the most unique part are its plug and play on-chain modules, which I'll start getting into right now. So what Injective provides and what I think really differentiates it from a number of other L1s that are all fast, all very cheap, are these plug and play finance modules, which effectively act as Lego building blocks for any type of dApp you might want to create, right? And I'll get into a few of these. So let's say you have the binary options module. So on Injective, you effectively get a template for binary options. So let's say you want to create a predictions market platform to figure out, oh, is Biden going to win the next election or is Trump going to win the next election? You want to build a sports betting app, let's say. Usually this would take you months, sometimes even a year, to create the primitives required to create on-chain options. But with Injective, a developer can come in, basically utilize that module, make certain optimizations as they see fit, and deploy that application. I've seen people deploy new applications in a couple hours, whereas on other chains, it might have taken weeks, if not months or years. And that's just one of the core modules on Injective, right? Another core functionality is its bridge module, right? So Injective over the years has worked with a lot of the core interoperability providers out there, like let's say Wormhole and Axelar. Injective built its own native Peggy bridge that allows us to interact with Ethereum. It's also natively compatible with Cosmos and IBC. So this means if a developer comes in, they're not restricted or siloed to just Injective native assets. They can, if they wish to, access assets from Ethereum, they can access assets from Solana, and they have much more optionality when it comes to the types of dApps or types of products that they want to build on chain. And a core offering and a core module that I think is a focal point of Injective is its on-chain order book. So Injective's order book is very unique in that every single parameter is actually on-chain, from order matching to order execution. An order book, if you're unfamiliar, if you go to any centralized exchange today, whether that be Binance or Coinbase, you usually see the order book. So it's like the list of orders that are executed on-chain. Typically, this is the main way people interact with finance in TradFi and also centralized exchanges. But to date, it's been very hard to recreate in DeFi, right? So Injective actually built a fully on-chain order book. And the beauty of this is you now have a unified liquidity layer on Injective. So for instance, if you build a new application on any chain, whether that be an L1 or an L2, you typically have to go out and find market makers. You typically have to give out massive incentives to attract liquidity to your protocol, which is very difficult, especially if you're a new protocol. You might have raised a small amount of funding. It's hard to get that liquidity. So what Injective decided to do is build this on-chain order book and integrate some of the largest finance institutions. Took us a long time, took us the last 2 years to get this done. But today on Injective, we have every major market maker, every major institution trading on the chain. These are big guys like Jump. These are small market makers you might not have heard of. But the beauty of this is if you build a new application on Injective today, so let's say you build a new DEX or a new derivatives protocol, you have access to all this liquidity from day one. You do not need to go out and give out incentives or try to hunt for this liquidity. And that's what I think makes Injective really special, this unified sort of liquidity layer that lives on chain. And when you sort of start to combine the different sort of plug and play modules with this unified liquidity layer, of course you need a very performant smart contracting layer. So on Injective, we have a native CosmWasm smart contracting layer. That is the native Cosmos WebAssembly smart contracting layer. But Injective's implementation of it is quite unique in that you can actually have automated smart contracts on Injective. What that means in basic levels is on a typical chain, right? Whether it be a smart contract on Ethereum or another chain, you typically have to have an external agent invoke that smart contract. So you need to have someone call a function or do something to make that smart contract work as expected. But on Injective, you don't need to do that. On every single block, you can have self-executing smart contracts. So based on preset parameters, the smart contract can execute on its own, which means if you have you can now build much more sophisticated applications on Injective, whether it be much more advanced lending applications, much more advanced trading protocols. You can build it because of the smart contract functionality that lives on chain. Over time, what we realized is while we had this very performant smart contracting layer, it is not for everyone because a lot of dev mindshare today still lives on EVM, or it still lives on the Solana C-level virtual machine. So we wanted to attract some of these developers as well. And this gets me into the final part of the Injective sort of technical toolkit, which is Injective's Electro chains. What we realized about a year ago is, okay, we have this really great smart contracting layer, but how do we get application developers who might be more familiar with, let's say, Solidity from the EVM world, or they might be familiar with Solana's virtual machine that tends to encompass most mindshare today, EVM and SVM. So what we decided to do is build new rollups attached to Injective that would each encompass these different sort of functionalities. And that's very different from other L2s today, because most L2s today you see are there for scaling or for achieving a specific purpose. What Injective wanted to do was just provide different frameworks or different development frameworks for developers to be able to come in. So actually about 2 weeks ago, we released the in-EVM layer on mainnet, which stands for Injective EVM. So you can now take applications you would typically find in Ethereum and easily deploy it on Injective. And the idea is it allows us to not serve as, get rid of any bottlenecks that developers might have previously had in terms of onboarding onto Injective. So they can now come on, build in Solidity, build in languages that are familiar to them, and have a toolkit that they're familiar with from the EVM world. And later, if they wish to, they can migrate to the main chain, which is the Injective WASM layer. And this works much better than trying to go to a developer and saying, hey, we're Injective, we have this really performant chain, but whatever you're building on EVM, you have to basically do it from scratch. So we wanted to get rid of that bottleneck. So this is why in EVM exists. And same with in SVM. So Solana, of course, has done a great job in terms of building mindshare outside of the typical EVM. In many ways, it provides different functionalities and performance standards compared to EVM. So about a year ago, we also started working very hard to build a roll-up that would be SVM-centric. And right now, it's on testnet. It's supposed to go live on mainnet in about the next 2-3 months. So very excited for that as well, because then for the first time in under one umbrella, you can have WASM developers, EVM developers, and SVM developers all under Injective, all serving one core function, which is, okay, you want to build great financial products. You're not bottlenecked by anything, whether it be programming language, whether it be liquidity due to our unified liquidity layer, or it be the plug and play module. So now you have the whole stack that you need to build very performant applications on top of Injective, because you can come in and build applications that would have taken months or years in a matter of days. You have liquidity from day one for your application. And then finally, you're not bottlenecked by programming languages, etc. You can code in any language. And that basically is, on a high level, Injective's technical toolkit in a nutshell. But what I focus on Injective is the business side of things. So I've been there for 4 years now, and over the years, I've worn a lot of different hats when it comes to BD and marketing and social media, you name it, I've probably done it. If it's outside of the realm of tech, I've probably done it. So I wanted the next part of the presentation to focus on business development, because I think this part is so underrated in crypto, where we build extremely interesting products and extremely interesting tech, but there's a common misconception in crypto or in Web2 in general and Web3 that if you build really cool products, you will get users to come and use it. Like, build it and they'll come. That's a very common saying. But what I've realized over the years is even if you build really cool tech and products, it's very hard to get usage. It's very hard to get users. It's very hard to build community. And that's where business and marketing comes in my opinion. So the next part of the presentation will really focus on, in my opinion, a few of the core tenets that I think helps build really good businesses in crypto, and why I think protocols such as Injective have been so successful in terms of growing community, in terms of growing the ecosystem. And the first point might sound really basic, but I think people really need to start off with asking themselves why. Why should users care about whatever you're building? And usually people mess this up because they start off very generic. So they'll say something like, oh, we're building the next gen lending protocol, or we're building the modular L1, etc., right? Or whatever. They'll just use generic terms and try to appeal to everyone. But once you do that, what you often miss out on is a core user segment that actually wants or needs whatever product you're building. And this is a very Web2 thesis, I know, but it really works in Web3 as well. If you don't focus in or hone in on the initial cohort of users, it's very hard to build from that. And I'll use Injective as an example. When we first started, what we realized is, yes, we want to build a very performant chain for DeFi, but DeFi is huge. We want to hone in on one thing. So what we honed in on is DEXs. So we wanted to build a very good chain just to build DEXs. So what does that mean? That meant like we needed to get liquidity, we needed to build this on-chain order book, etc. Once we had sort of conquered that and built the community around that, only then did we move on to other segments of DeFi in itself. So I guess my first suggestion is really hone in on who you're trying to attract and why you're special and why someone would care about your particular protocol or chain over the 50 other protocols and chains that are out there competing in the same exact protocol. And I think that leads directly into the next part, which in my opinion is the most important part of crypto. It's community development. I think a lot of people probably agree here, but I think community is the most important part of crypto. And I think that's what really differentiates Web 2 from Web 3. Because in Web 2, when you typically think about business development, you think about partnerships or getting users. But in crypto, many times users come only if you have an ecosystem or a community that's budding or thriving around you. That's why you see many even pre-product platforms have really good communities. So as soon as they go live, they actually have users, right? But even if you agree that community is important, how do you actually build community, right? If you think about some of the hottest sort of projects out there today, whether it be Solana or Monad or Injective, let's say, the reason I think we have lived through the test of time and continue to sort of thrive is because of the community we've been able to build. And that really begins with the first point, which was, okay, you honed in on your particular audience, you built, but how do you actually get to know who you should be building for? I think this has to do a lot with attention to the community. And This doesn't just mean you're hosting AMAs or you're speaking at conferences. It really means that you are in Discord, you're in Twitter, actually talking to the random 5 people that might be in your community initially. Your community initially will not be big, but it is very important to get their feedback and learn, okay, what do these users want? What do these people want? What is their feedback? And from there, that will help sort of ascertain what you should focus your efforts on. And I'll give an example again from Injective, right? So Injective, the community today calls themselves ninjas, right? Sounds very cool. But we didn't think of that ourselves. The Injective team actually had a very hard time thinking of a mascot, thinking of a community name, because the name Injective is a very technical math term, and it's very hard to like make things rhyme with it. It's very hard for us to make sort of a contrived sort of community name. But one of the people in our Discord one day said, hey, what if we called yourselves ninjas, because the word ninja has INJ in it, which is our native token ticker, and the community seemed to love it. So we just ran with it. And that just helped create so much more organic attention and traction. And that's where I think many projects mess up today, where they try to regurgitate whatever is hot, whatever narrative is hot, instead of just honing in on what makes them special. And I think that's really what has helped Injective grow over time, because even when other narratives were hot, I remember in 2021, play to earn gaming, for instance, was very hot. And then last year, many people thought DeFi was dead. And Injective didn't care, because we knew our niche, we knew our core, and we knew our community, and they wanted DeFi. So even if the larger crypto ecosystem was saying like DeFi is dead, or like gaming is hot now, or you have to pivot to metaverse, it didn't matter, because we knew where our users were. We weren't trying to appeal to all of crypto. We're just trying to build around our community. And that really goes into the next point, which in my opinion, the fuel you use to grow your community is very important. And I think one of the things that's really helped Injective over the last year and a half is our ambassador program. So right now, Injective has a community of over 700,000 people across sort of socials, across meetups, across any sort of metric you might think of. But it only happened because we, again, honed in on community growth and really focused in on community. What that means is we started off very small. We wanted to make sure the same story and the same vision we had, which is, oh, Injective is this blockchain built for finance. This is XYZ reasons we're special. So can we have all the guides and materials we need to inform new users? So when new users on board or new community members on board, they can know that, oh, this is exactly what Injective is. This is why I believe in it. Because if you don't get that initial belief, your community won't grow. Even if you throw a lot of money at ambassador programs or anything, your community will not grow. And that's where I think a lot of projects are making this mistake today, where they're using different airdrop campaigns or other things to sort of show that they have community, but it's not real community. Because if you are just paying for a community or paying for, let's say, your traction, that'll be very transient or temporary in nature, right? So as soon as that airdrop is finished, whatever is done, they'll move on to the next thing, because that's just how crypto works. Like, there's a new hot narrative every single month, and it's really hard to capture people's attention. The only way you retain them is if you actually were on the ground, like I was saying before, on Discord, like talking to them, actually going to meetups, even if it seems like it's not a good value of your time, or your time might be better spent doing some big partnership or working on some big tech product. It doesn't matter if your ultimate user or ultimate community is not there to use it. So even if you do some big announcement, but your community doesn't care, then whatever you did didn't even matter. So that's why, in my opinion, it's so important to just hone in on this effort and make sure everyone on the team is on the same page when it comes to this. Which really gets me into the third point, which is business development is all about ecosystem growth. Community, in my opinion, helps your ecosystem grow. It helps inform what your community wants, because usually what your community wants is what users want. So for instance, for Injective's case, we're a chain, and there are many dApps in the world that we can go after. There are many different segments, but we knew exactly what our users wanted at what times, because we were constantly interacting with them. So I'll give a few examples. So these are just a few, and a lot of this is dependent on how your marketing and business team works with tech, right? And that's what, in my opinion, helps inform your ecosystem growth or community growth efforts. And what this graphic I want to represent is that business and marketing and tech always need to work in tandem. I think many times at most crypto companies, you basically have one segment of the team that's completely siloed from tech. So for instance, product might be working on a cool product, but business is focused on something else. And usually if you're not on the same page internally, that'll seep in through your external comms, and it will just create disjointed community efforts or growth efforts. So once you hone in on this community that we were talking about before, then only then do you know that, oh, this is what tech, business, marketing should all focus on. This is exactly what our tech can power, and this is where we're going. And that's how Injective sort of went about growing its ecosystem. And it might have seemed slow at first, but it was all very intentionally done, which is why I think we sort of remained here even after so many cycles and years. These are just some of the applications on Injective today. So let's take DojoSwap, for example, right? It's an AMM on top of Injective that got up to almost $100 million in TVL in about a week. And the reason it was so successful is because we noticed a couple months ago that a lot of users on Injective were minting new tokens and wanted immediate LP or immediate liquidity for it. But our order book environment, which is what Injective focused on, doesn't necessarily allow you to do that for long tail assets. So we had to go out on the business team and find builders, because we listened to our community. We knew we needed an AMM. So we were able to go out and find the best builders to build that. And then because we had helped fill the gap that the community actually wanted, so we got usage immediately. We didn't have to tack on extra incentives. We didn't have to go and promise an airdrop. We didn't have to do any of that because it's what the community wanted. And we went out and found a product that helped fit the community's needs. And that's what we've done with all the different applications you see here today, whether it be different money markets or lending. We went step by step and only onboarded a product once we realized, oh, there would be traction because this is what the community wants, or there will be traction because this is what we figured out through our Discord calls or one-on-ones with our different community members, that they would use it and they would actually be capital deployed. And that's how the Injective ecosystem has grown. Every single element you see here today was done very intentionally, whether it be different apps and tooling, whether it be different dApps we onboarded, whether it be different institutions we onboarded, right? It all worked because we continued to tell the same story, regardless of what the overarching crypto narrative might have been. We continued to talk to our community and figured out what exactly they want. And this story has resonated really well with a lot of people. So let's say some of our big investors, so let's say Hashed, which is in Korea, or even Mark Cuban or Binance, the reason they continue to back us and support us is because we continue to be so focused, so laser focused on just these efforts. And every single element, again, goes back to the first point I made, where every single collaboration, integration, or opportunity we take on has to do with Injective being the best blockchain for finance. And that's all we focused on. Whether today parallel chains are popular, whether it be modularity, it doesn't really matter, because if it doesn't really fit our end goal of being the best chain for finance, it doesn't matter, because we know what our community wants and we'll continue to fit those needs. Which gets me ultimately to the last point I want to make in this presentation, where I think a lot of people get lost and try to tackle number 4 first, where again, crypto's an industry, in my opinion, that's run by narratives. One day something is hot, the next day it's not. And that's what's happened through many cycles and many months and years, right? And you have to evolve at a certain point, right? For instance, Injective began just by building a chain that's really good for making DEXs. But if we had just continued to do that, it'd be very difficult for us to grow our ecosystem, because that is just one vertical. And so when we had dominated it, we needed to move on and build other things adjacent, whether it be options, whether it be lending, to sort of fill out the entire bucket. But if we had done that too fast, it wouldn't have worked. So let's say initially we tried to do all of DeFi. That wouldn't have worked, because that means we would have never been that good at any one thing. We wouldn't have been the best chain for DEXs. We wouldn't have been the best chain for options, and it just wouldn't work. So yes, it is important for you guys to know what's going on in the market, to know what's going on in Twitter and what people care about. Just make sure that it aligns with your goals and what you're doing internally. And if you do that, it is my belief that you will continue to survive and thrive in crypto. So yeah, that's it. That's my little presentation on sort of business and marketing and tech and how it can all work in tandem. And yeah, give us a follow. You can follow any of our adventures on Injective, @Injective on Twitter. And some of us are around here if you guys want to chat. So thank you.